Hello and welcome to the Surgical Spirit podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Haidar Al-Hakim, the Third Eye Doctor. Pull up a chair and get ready for some candid and uncompromising discussion with experts, innovators, agitators, and influential people from every corner of health and well-being. From inside the hospital to at home in the kitchen, we're leaving no stone unturned in our quest to uncover the secrets of healthier, happier, more successful, and less stressful lives. Thank you so much for joining us, and without further ado, let's meet this episode's guest. Hello and welcome to the Surgical Spirit podcast. This is Dr. Haidar Al-Hakim, the Third Eye Doctor. Thanks for tuning in today, and we have Nats with us today. Hello, Nats.
Hello, Haidar. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. We always have very interesting conversations. We've had several conversations in the past, and sometimes we do get very deep. But, you know, it's easy to be superficial, and it takes a bit of effort to go deep. And you do a lot of deep work, I must say. Some of the content that you produce on your website and on your Twitter feed and in your group gets really, really deep into, you know, the human aspect of us, rather than just sort of staying on the professional level, which, I mean, for me, it is quite superficial. So I'm interested. I'm interested about your journey into well-being.
I think it's just observation of my life and mainly experiencing others. So I've grown up always been feeling like an outsider and always looking in, and it was sort of self-imposed. I was shy, but I was always intrigued by human interaction and why people do the things they do. Why do they make the choices they make? And even though at a young age I wasn't thinking in those terms, as I got older, it was the same fascination with people, but now giving a language to it. So I find it hard to be superficial or to just float on the surface of anything. I'm always interested in what's going on beneath the surface, what's happened behind the story of that person is telling right now, or just the words that they're expressing. What else is going on? And as soon as I started asking those questions more, I started receiving answers and things that behind the words that are concealed within the words, and then learning a whole other language of intuition.
When do you think was that aha moment for you?
It was in high school. I think people would always naturally come to me with their problems because I was the only one who didn't have a boyfriend, didn't have any drama going on, even though that's what I wanted so badly. I was forced into this kind of outsider supporter friend person, and people would just come to me and I would just have knowledge about what's going on in their relationship dynamic before they even said anything to me about it. So that would freak me out. But it was just like a clear knowing, like, oh, of course this is what's happening. Of course this is what's playing out in your relationship because he or she has all this stuff and you have all this stuff. So naturally, of course. So that it was like, how could you not see that? Because I get it. So that's when it started to happen. But I didn't think much of it. I just got the comment, wow, you're really good with advice. You should go into psychology. And I didn't know what else to do from there.
Where do you think that came from, that sort of ability to know about people's relationships?
I think could be the training from a young age and just observing without knowing that I was observing. I think we all have these natural abilities. We are all intuitive. We all can read what's beneath the surface if we're interested in seeing what's beneath the surface. Well, first we have to know that there's something beneath the surface, that there's depths to every person, and that we have to be interested in seeing what's beneath the surface, what's beneath the story or the persona or the facade that someone is showing.
I mean, I have a similar experience. I mean, I always consider myself to be an outsider, and I didn't have any let's say, attraction relationships with males or females. So I was like the person to go to for advice. And I think for me it was just the process of listening and letting people offload what they had onto me. And I felt the load myself, and I would get tired and burnt out. So there wasn't one incident that you think really. I mean, you said the teenagers, that you're sort of in your teenagers, and that was the thing that. Was that because your awareness changed during those years of yourself?
I was an awkward teenager in that I looked awkward and felt like awkward. I don't think I had a change in awareness. I think it was the friends, one particular friend who was interested in the more occult, esoteric, which, at 12 and 13 is kind of an odd thing, especially in the protective shell that I grew up in. So that sort of opened me up to like concepts of, say, astral projection and the occult and things that, I was only exposed to because of her. So I think that might have played a part in just opening me up to understanding that there is more than meets the eye in the world and people. But I think when you ask me that question now, the person who comes to mind is my best friend, and just sharing her stories of her experiences with a boyfriend. And like, how you just said you didn't have any sort of romantic partners, and so you became the go-to person, and you would listen. I would do that for a bit, but because I just had information about what was going on, I would stop listening and I would interrupt and just share what I thought, or shared the advice, this is what I think you should do. Even though I haven't been in that situation, how could I know that advice would be useful? But I said it with such authority that people listened, but then they would feel ashamed that they couldn't implement it, and they wouldn't come back to me to let me know that, or they would delay. So, I guess I might be fast forwarding, but there's, a lesson there about you might get information, but it's good to just let that person complete their offload before you think about sharing it or exploring something a little deeper. Yes, because it might be off base.
Yeah. I mean, it takes time, doesn't it? Not to coach or not to teach, just to sort of be present
or rescue.
Yeah, we're good at that as healthcare professionals. I mean, well-being now is a bit of a big buzzword at the moment. Everyone's getting on that bandwagon. I sometimes have reluctance to use it.
Sorry, I cut you off. Well-being, just like everything, wellness, well-being, it's an industry now, a multi-billion-dollar industry that exploits people suffering. And, I'm part of that industry, of course, not the exploitation bit, I hope, but the recognition that there are missing ingredients to what we've been taught is fundamentals of health. And it's the stuff beneath the surface that you can't see and you can feel and you can have an awareness of, but it's not something you can give a pill to fix. It requires a lot of effort and work and determination, commitment to being well or feeling well despite whatever's going on in life. And so if I look at my journey, I've always been intuitive and could tune into what was happening for a person. I shut that down for a bit during my scientist years because you had to be able to provide proof, evidence, some way of showing what you're talking about. And so I had to there was no room for that intuitiveness to exist in that time. And then as I got into my late 20s, it became a huge call. And by the time I was in my 30s, it's like, you can't ignore this anymore. This is what you need to pay attention to, and it'll take over. So it was through observing doctors, oncologists in practice that it took over. It was just the thing. Their actions, their words, their experiences started speaking to me more than the words they were using to speak to me. Does that make sense?
Kind of. Maybe some of the listeners don't understand what you mean by that. How would you describe that? How would you explain that?
So shadowing oncologists in their practice, working with children and young people with cancer as well as survivors, they would go through the motions, the rituals of the doctor-patient relationship, asking the right questions, showing empathy, showing compassion, using humor, helping people feel at ease. But there was such a discomfort in the room as well, not just coming from patients, but also coming from doctors. And the conversations that I would be listening to among all the doctors, as well as what they would share with me, or the comments that they would say to me about what they have to do, told me more about them, that they are witnessing and experiencing existential crisis, even distress, all the time, and that there was no outlet and there was no support to process that, or if there was, they weren't using it. And so they carry that with them day in and day out, from patient to patient to consult, from consult to consult, into their families, into their everything, which is part of a driving force to keep them committed and determined to help in the way that they do. But it, I think, never feels like it's enough. So I was able to just feel all that in that short interaction without them saying anything about it. So I'm just able to feel the feelings that were unexpressed. But they spoke to me more strongly or loudly than the words that they would use to describe their experience.
So, I mean, it's a very stressful situation. I mean, it's a very stressful interaction and life situation. I mean, it's not for everyone. And
definitely not for everyone.
And I mean, how do we prepare, the up and coming doctors, or the ones who are there right now, for these difficult situations? I mean, existentially, it's very difficult being in these interactions.
Yeah. Well, I think one is the not going into any interaction thinking that they're stressful or difficult, because that's one perception, but they have to remember why they're going into, why they've chosen, or the profession has chosen them, or they chose that profession because they want to make a difference. They're not necessarily there to cure everything, but they're there to provide comfort, support, information, humor, whatever is in their realm of expertise to provide, without necessarily giving them the whole treatment, the whole everything to cure, to bring them back to a state of complete perfect health. So I think being realistic about what they can provide, and not taking the responsibility on someone else's well-being on their shoulders, because ultimately they're not responsible for that. They're responsible for what they can provide, and maintaining their role and their purpose boundaries. So those are, when anyone doesn't do that well, then they will feel responsible. They'll feel like there's so much more that they could do, should have done. And they will never be at peace with what they have done. And so, of course, everything will feel difficult or uncomfortable versus fulfilling or meaningful.
So it's changing, changing that perspective, changing that mindset, essentially.
Yeah, as well as being fully aware of what your role is. And doctors play multiple roles in a single consultation. Again, you can be a coach, you can be a teacher, you could be a friend, you can be a pastoral carer, you can be, there's 10 hats I'm sure you can wear. And it's just knowing what each hat is for, and maybe not wearing all of them at once. And sometimes you may only need to wear one hat. Maybe your role is just being the listener. And that's the only intervention that's required in that time you have with your patient. And being okay with feeling like that's enough, because you notice the effect that has on the patient. And hopefully the effect is they felt validated, heard, relief, to be able to offload some of their worries to someone. So yeah, being clear about your role and the boundaries of that role, the expectations that you have of yourself, expectations that the patient could have of you, making sure that that's a shared understanding. And also always being present to your purpose. What am I here for? What am I trying to achieve? When you lose sight of that, then it's easy to become overwhelmed by so-called the difficulty or the stress that can be encountered.
Purpose is really important, and do you think purpose changes? Has your purpose changes, or has it stayed the same throughout the years?
I think it depends. I think your vision can change over time or evolve as you're evolving. The purpose, for example, if you're here to serve humanity in the form of being a doctor, then the purpose doesn't change. You're always going to serve. It's the way you go about it, the way that looks in practice or outside of practice that can change. But ultimately, you're there to do that job. So if anything gets in the way of that, that will be a source of illness or distress or crisis, things that interfere with your well-being, not being able to fulfill your purpose or feel or perceive that you're fulfilling a purpose.
So it's sort of the vision or the periphery around purpose that changes, but ultimately the purpose is pretty much the same. And looking at your website, you talk about depression being a catalyst for change.
For me, yes. Yeah, because it's a state of existence that's not sustainable, so something has to change, and the way I think or experience or feel about anything needed assessment and adjustment if I found that they were contributing to the symptoms of depression that I didn't want to feel anymore.
Yeah. Why did it happen?
Not fulfilling my purpose. Being in an environment or in a job that, even though that's what I trained to do, it wasn't what I wanted to do anymore. And even though my intuition, my feeling inside was like, you're done here, it took 5 years for me to take action, to follow that guidance. And every day, every month that went by, it became harder and harder and harder for me to maintain motivation. I'd have spurts of motivation when something was going well, but if I look at that time, it was just a slow decline in my energy and desire to engage with life.
And what was the catalyst, or what was the trigger point that changed that all?
I left the job and decided I wasn't going to be a scientist anymore.
What was the reason?
So at first, I thought it was the environment. It felt pretty toxic. There's lots of gender bias, favoritism stuff. The relationships seemed a bit icky, not necessarily my group, but just observing how people related to each other. It just felt cold. It felt, this kind of cold, professional, polite. No one felt like they were being real. So there's the easy blame of the culture. There's the easy blame of academia in general, of incentivized research that you only study or you apply for things that are sexy or publishable or fundable, but not necessarily things that you really are interested in. Not really able to take risks because, well, you're not going to get funded for that, or what if it doesn't work, all that stuff. So there's that area that I could blame, but ultimately I was done with that job. I had done what I needed to do there. I'd learned what I needed to learn sufficiently, and it's time for me to move on. I had other things that I need to do, clearly. And denying that inner voice saying, what am I doing here? Like, get out. Not listening to it and moving further and further and further away from this kind of other path that was unfolding or could have unfolded was tiring. It's tiring to maintain a life that isn't yours to maintain. And that would I just got felt drained. So when I left academia, I didn't have any job, didn't know what I was going to do next. I didn't have any more stability in my life. The thing that had stabilized me for years, as well as some other supports in my life outside my profession, were not there. So when you don't have those stability points, when you're going through a transition, it's like you get lifted out of your body, or you get lifted out of your life and you're kind of floating in your life and can't get grounded. And so I just felt extremely exhausted, just typical experiences of depression, where you just have no energy to do anything, almost no will to live, can't see beyond that darkness. And so it was slowly happening, and just me leaving is what put me right into that intense space. That's a story.
Yeah. I'm just interested at the sort of the trigger point, or the incident that made you leave. Was it because it was a culmination of all the?
Yeah, it was a combination of not feeling satisfied with my work, not feeling like I'm contributing to something meaningful. It was cancer research. We're so far removed from actual patient experience. And even though I thought about transitioning into more qualitative research or working directly with patient experience, the opportunities didn't come up for me. So I just felt like, well, maybe I'm not meant to be here. So I had gone through some, interpersonal issues in the previous years, and it was like January 2010, I just made a promise to myself, this is my last year. And even if I don't have a job by the end of the year, I'm done. So I had to fulfill that promise. I owed it to myself, and that was it. So nothing really happened in that year to make me go, damn it, I'm out of here. But, the decision was made. And I don't know about you, but if you make a decision, you have a strong conviction to follow a new path, it's so hard to stay in the old path because you're ready to move to the next one. You've made that decision. So when you resign from a job and you have to give, 6 weeks notice, coming in for those 6 weeks is torture.
Yeah, I mean, and particularly if you don't fulfill that, is such it's torture for the self.
Yeah.
It is very difficult. It's interesting that you talked about different hats that doctors wear, and really the only hat that I remember I was taught about is being the academic, symptomatic and diagnosis and treatment doctor. I mean, we weren't taught anything about being a friend and being a pastor and being a teacher or being a listener. I mean, I can't remember any of these. I mean, obviously I trained a long time ago and things have changed since then. But do you think there's a role for that in medical school and undergraduate study, for looking at the other aspects of roles and expectations for both doctors and patients?
Yeah, whether it's taught or not, that's the reality. That's what ends up happening, because you encounter your patient, you recognize they have all these needs beyond what you've been trained to believe that you can do with them, that you're kind of forced to enter into these different roles. So it helps to define what role you're playing with them besides the clinical expert, because that's not going to cut it.
I mean, these things happen outside work in the sense that we have these different roles outside the work. But is it worth sort of formalizing and sort of making it a bit more regimental, just that people recognize how important these different roles are?
I think so, because then that would reduce the shell shock when people start actually interacting with patients beyond the theoretical world of medical school. And one of the biggest problems is that there's different expectations of what the doctor could do or what the patient could do. So between the doctor and patient. So wouldn't it be great if those expectations were discussed up front? And so, and some way forward could be negotiated between doctor and patient, instead of this is the unwritten expectation I have of you, doctor, and this is the unwritten expectation I have of you, patient, and I'm going to give you advice, and I'm going to assume that it's so easy that you will take it because my authority should be enough. But what if they don't have the capacity to do that? What if they have other priorities? What if they can't afford that prescription? What if? So unless there's some understanding of what you're there to do and how you can help them, and that's explicit, it's agreed on, it's understood, then there's going to be different agendas interacting in any patient-doctor encounter or patient-nurse encounter. So it helps to talk about these things during the training, that your role is a listener, that your role is a coach, and then to be provided with training in coaching and training in spiritual care, or all those different roles that everyone's going to inevitably play, and in teamwork, how to collaborate, how to negotiate, how to demonstrate assertive communication. So these are all different skills required to play these different roles. That are inevitable.
And it's funny that we call these soft skills as well, rather than essential skills.
I don't call them. I call them being human skills.
Yeah, exactly. And I had this discussion with a lot of people, and it's about educating them early, rather than waiting until they develop, certain habits and ideas from teens and later. But that requires a political will, and it requires cultural change, and it takes a long time. Yeah, it takes a long time.
And going back to this concept of soft skills and intuition, is that if we look at our educational model that we grow into from a young age, it's not there to cultivate emotional intelligence. It hasn't been one to help us navigate our intuition. It's been about intellectual development and knowing things versus, or in addition to, how we know things. How do we know what we know? How do we have conversations with someone and just get a flash of insight about what's going on for them without them having said anything, and that you kind of share what you just thought of or what just came to mind, and they're shocked that you know all that information. There are other ways to perceive or receive information that goes beyond what we learn in a textbook or through transmission of information from person to teacher to student. And so that hasn't been part of our education. It's been kind of neglected and ignored, but they're vital aspects of how we relate and understand each other and how we help others heal. So it's fundamental, especially in medical school, which are meant to be training healers.
I mean, it was definitely fundamental for me for losing my intuition and my true skill, which is being a healing human being. And having spent school and medical school, you kind of flip into that intellectual and that academic switch, which for some it's what they're about, and we should celebrate that, and
Definitely.
we should push them to the forefront and let them excel in that excellence that they have of academia. But I'm not academic, and the problems that I
what
had,
about the rest of us?
I mean, the problems that I had in medical school and training and everything else when I was working in the NHS was related to my poor academic abilities. And because I get bored with facts and figures, I get bored with statistics. I can't do all that fancy, I don't know what they're called these days, but all those studies, and help me here, Naz.
And quantitative approaches, the ways that we believe something is true based on what our senses tell us, what physical senses tell us, versus something other ways of understanding experience that are also valid. So they can work beautifully together, but the training only supports the development and the refinement of those aspects, the things that are measurable versus the things that are felt and experienced.
So can we teach intuition?
We can definitely teach intuition, and intuition is basically not something I can tell you to do. It's something I can facilitate or help facilitate. So it's helping the other person tune into themselves and their feeling nature and grasping the language of that. So what I mean is, for example, when someone has a pain in their body and, I'm talking with them and they're telling me about a pain in their body, and I get them to kind of go into more of a mindful state and to put all their attention and focus into that pain. And then I ask, what does it look like? What does it feel like? What is the temperature? Is it throbbing? What is it giving a message? What is it telling you? And every single time they'll have something. And majority of the time, when they actually talk about it and we start to tease out what that pain is for them in the language that has value to them, the pain dissipates. Because it's something that they're not avoiding and they're trying to, numb with either medication or avoidance or anything like that. It's something that they're validating, they're acknowledging, and they're actually curious about. And it's not scary. It's just how our body communicates with us. So that's intuition, how our feelings hold a lot of information about what we believe about things, and they hold messages, but we're not so great at acknowledging that because we haven't necessarily been taught to tune into that aspect of the self. We've been taught to think about things but not feel about things. Unless we've had good teachers. But generally, if we rely on education, the system, the curriculum, it's not about that.
So have you had formal teachers to develop that intuition skills?
Yes. I've trained intensively and continue to keep honing that in. So the only way to really understand your language of intuition is through trusting it. So a lot of the time people feel it's their imagination. Fine, it could be your imagination, but it's still a source of information about how you think and feel, mainly about how you feel or experience your world or your inner world. So by talking about it and sharing what your experience with someone else, especially if you're working with someone else trying to help them and you're gaining information about what might be going on for them beyond what they're telling you, by sharing that information and it resonating with that person being helped, that builds your confidence that you're not just making stuff up, that you're actually perceiving something that is real. And the only way to do that is to trust it. And the only way to develop it is to trust it and to follow it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's trusting the self and looking within. We don't do much of that at all, to be honest, at all. And I mean, in my book, it literally is an internal book in the sense that you spend 30 days looking inside of you. Just to get you into that habit.
There's a lot going on inside.
Yeah, just to get you to
self-inquiry. Yes.
And as you know, what we see outside of us is actually inside of us. So our reality is our internal reality, and how we look at things is different for each single human being.
There's no two experiences that are the same. Even if someone shared a similar story, the conditions, the circumstances, the perceptions are all going to be unique. Yeah. So we can never truly understand someone else's experience, but we can imagine what it might be like without having to have gone through something similar, because we can be tuned in to what's happening in their world through, which requires empathy, but it's how our intuition works. We feel what it might be like. We can feel, some people can feel in their own body what the other person's feeling, like I can feel in my own body where someone else's pain is. And when I ask them to look at that pain and the images or the information they get, that's what I see as well. So I'm really in their world, not invading their world, with permission, of course, but it's just, it doesn't require any effort on my part. It just is. It's just this natural ability, because I've been working on it for so long, just to go beyond what their words are telling me, but to feel what they're feeling. And that way I can help them navigate, because they haven't navigated it yet.
Mm. Mm. So it's like a helping hand.
It is a helping hand without taking over, without, taking over their ship and then telling them what to be doing. It's just, look at this. What do you see? What do you perceive? And then sharing what I'm perceiving and seeing what resonates. So it's a collaboration.
Yeah, and it's so much easier when you've got another human being with you. Just the fact that another human being is there is a great comfort and relief.
Yeah, I think it's a requirement for the process to be successful. That you can do it on your own, but to have that confirmation that someone else is seeing what you're seeing, or feeling what you're feeling, or with you just in general, is a comfort, and it's just confirming and validating. So that in itself is powerful.
I mean, it's different from meditation, would you say?
For me, I use meditation to facilitate that process, because meditation gets me into a zone of openness and clarity, and my mind is not involved. So there's no real thinking. It's a direct perception or direct experience, which to me is a different thing than the thinking processes or the mental processes, because it's a visceral or somatic experience.
And it's quite physiological as well, which is where the emotions come in. It's quite a physiological response. And
yes,
some people may be a bit reluctant or scared because it is quite physiological. That it does raise the blood pressure, and it does cause you to have blushes and physiological respenses.
Yeah. So.
But it's fun.
Not everyone
fun.
wants to go there. Yeah, and not everyone wants to go there.
I mean, I find it very awakening. I feel alive when you're sort of really, really in tune and intuitive with your patient, and you're kind of there for them. It doesn't always happen, because I do feel the drain. And
not everyone's open. Not everyone's open. So you can't access people in the same way all the time. They have to feel open to wanting that level of help. And it's not even something that they have to say or be conscious of. It's just, if people have a lot of guards up because they've been betrayed, they've been deceived, they've had trauma, they're going to have some very strong fortresses around them. So they're not necessarily going to be so open and wanting anyone to look into them. They might have a lot of shame that they're trying to conceal. I mean, who doesn't want to be concealing their shame? That's part of the thing that we've been conditioned to do. Again, not everyone, but so that there's a lot of effort involved in trying to keep that hidden. And as a professional, when you're tuning in, there's a difference between being with someone and observing what's going on for them, or even feeling it in your body, and going too far where you're internalizing their feeling in your body. You're absorbing it. You're kind of feeling it as if it's your own, and not being able to distinguish between the boundary between you and that other person. So you kind of merge instead of retaining your boundary and your objectivity. So I think that's what happens with empathic overload, or what's called compassion fatigue, where you just become overwhelmed by this emotional flood of information, or the flood of information that comes with emotions, and you don't know what to do with it, and it kind of absorbs into your system and stays there.
How can we stop that?
Lots of ways. Again, it requires a lot of self-inquiry, knowing your boundaries, knowing where you end, not trying to solve someone's problems, not feeling responsible for their problems or their experience, because they're responsible for their experience. You're only responsible for what your role in supporting them. So again, the clear boundary thing, knowing your roles, comes back to that. There are practices to use your breathing to breathe that through you, so you're not internalizing it, you're intending to just keep breathing through. So being connected to your breath instead of holding your breath and holding it all in and going, shit, what do I do with this person now? What do I tell them? What am I supposed to do? That stuff, I don't have an answer. That's that sort of pressure. We feel responsible to do something instead of just being present and just allowing their experience, them to have their experience, them to feel upset. So feeling like we have to do something about it because they shared their problem with us, that's another risk. So when we lose our ability to maintain objectivity and be realistic about what we can do with them in the time we have with them and within the confines of our role, then again, it becomes risky business and you can take on too much.
And causes burnout.
I think that is more around compassion fatigue. That's a whole other conversation about what's compassion fatigue, what's burnout, what's not compassion fatigue, because it has nothing to do with compassion. I like to call it an empathic overload. Like we've gone too far in empathy. Instead of just looking in someone's world, we've kind of entered into their world and we're taking part of their world back with us after the consultation. And not the good stuff, just the stuff that bothers us or is uncomfortable or brings up our own related story. It becomes a bit about us.
Can you stop that from happening?
Yes, you can. And you can also, it can happen anyway, but there are different practices, again, where you go into your own body. You know, this is again about using your intuition to seek in your body wherever there's pain or comfort or tension and interrogate it. What's this about? Why do I feel tense? What's going on here? And using that approach, which can sound a bit freaky and out there, but you know, we need to develop dialogue with ourselves so that we can tap into what's going on inside our world. And if we just kind of ignore it or just not even know that it's there, we're going to have these pains and issues in our body and we're just not going to know what to do about it. Or we'll just automatically go and have to go see a doctor before we've given ourselves a chance to take a look at it. And it's not about avoiding or not seeing a doctor, but it's about, or any health professional for that matter, but it's about giving ourselves a chance to tune in to our world and trying to learn, what is my body trying to tell me? What is the information within my emotions that are trying to communicate with me right now that I'm doing really well with avoiding or neglecting or repressing through some of my many addictions or evasive actions? Because some of those emotions are really hard to feel. Disappointment is a hard one. Grief, regret, resentment, guilt, shame, anger. Society is not great at feeling those things, so we have really good ways of not feeling them. But then they don't, when we don't feel them, we don't allow them with the same ease that we allow joy and bliss and happiness and contentment and peace and tranquility, then we're not working with the full set of information that we have access to.
Yeah. I mean, it's you know, we go back to culture. It's sort of ingrained within us from an early age. I remember me, and if I got upset or cried or had a tantrum, I wasn't allowed to continue, and I'd suppress that.
I got you're too sensitive, but now I realize sensitivity is a bloody good gift to have.
Well, apparently I'm too emotional as well. We were with some friends the other day, and I got emotional, too emotional. We were talking about education, and I mean, I home educate our children, and they got upset because of it, and I got emotional about it, and they got really upset.
Oh, you got passionate about it.
Yeah, passion, emotion. But these are such essential humanistic characteristics which we can never deny, both the positive and the negative.
Well, if we deny it, that's part of a lot of illness.
Yeah.
Because we're not great at allowing certain feelings to come up, especially since, again, if people have experienced types of childhood trauma, then they're going to carry with them memories or experiences that we don't want to revisit. So we have to do a good job of repressing, and then putting more emphasis on developing our intellect as a way to help us navigate. But at a certain point in our life, that's no longer, we're not going to be able to get away with that. At some stage, those emotions, that Pandora box is going to want to open, because the pressure is so strong that it's just going to go boom. And if we don't have great ways of working with what emerges, don't have enough support, then it's going to be overwhelming, and we won't know how to deal with it, and we'll just be emotional swings.
Yeah. I mean, what would you say the three top ways of tuning back into your intuition and your true emotional state?
Well, if you haven't done it yet, then my strongest recommendation is to do it with a skilled practitioner who can help guide you through a process, because how do you know what to look for if you've never done it? So always start with someone with the intention that they're going to teach you how to do it yourself, so that you don't depend on someone else to help you out with that. Journaling is an easy one as well, where you just stream of consciousness writing. You just write and write. You just intend to write 5 pages. You don't know what's going to come out, and you just write. Eventually the stuff on the surface of your mind is sloughed off. It's the rubbish, and then out from under that emerges this wisdom and lots of things that make you cry, because it's finally able to come out. So that's an easy, potentially safer version. Some people say meditation. That's one way, but again, I wouldn't recommend that without guidance, because you don't know what's lurking underneath the surface. So when you finally give yourself space, all sorts of stuff can come into your awareness that can be upsetting. And you might feel like you're doing meditation all wrong, or you might feel like it becomes overwhelming. So again, always do this sort of thing with a guide, with a very well-trained, skilled guide. I just don't think we should be doing anything alone until we've learned sufficiently how to do it, and that we could feel secure or stable doing it ourselves.
Yeah. In terms of spirituality, because you talk about spirituality, the spirituality principles. What do you mean by that, spirituality principles?
I think people define spirituality in so many different ways. It's what helps you feel connected to your world, helps you, give you meaning about your experiences and the world around you. So it's whatever helps you feel connected with yourself, your community, your family, your profession, your purpose, as well as something bigger than yourself. And that you're an unfolding, you're a work in progress, and that you're evolving, and the process that takes. Spiritual practices can help you, and principles can help you navigate that or understand the unfolding process.
And in terms of your top spiritual principles, I mean, you talk about connection. Are there like a number of principles that you sort of follow, or you adhere to, or?
I have pillars that I follow. So one is meditation. So that's a way of connecting with all that I am, as well as my spiritual connection to the universe, God, Goddess, all of the above. It's all the same to me. Quantum field, universe, Mother Earth, Goddess, whatever name, human spirit, they're all the same to me. Science, all the same. It's just the words we use to define things that limits them and restricts them. It's like, no, you can't believe in that if you believe in that. It's like, it's not even a belief. It's just connection. It's all to me. So meditation, practice that purify my mind. So a lot of spiritual practices like chanting mantra, for example. They have there's more research evidence emerging around the beneficial effects of chanting mantra on regulating nervous system, restoring, activating parasympathetic nervous system, affecting cortisol levels, all sorts of physiological changes that support more of this peacefulness. So, and it's very fast compared to, say, mindfulness. So I prefer that. I like the fast things. I like shortcuts without cutting corners. A lot of studying deeply. So, lots of people like to read lots of books around different subjects. So there's kind of broadly reading. I like to go deep into something. And from there, I can start to really wrestle with ideas and develop wisdom from that process. So I'm interested in wisdom, not just knowledge. Knowledge is an access to wisdom. Because wisdom is something that can be universally applied. And when we go through hardships in our life, the lessons that we can learn from them, maybe we don't see them in the moment, but when we've gotten distance and we've evolved to a degree that we can feel at peace with what happened in the past, and we actually can feel grateful potentially about that thing that happened in the past, that feeling is not just a cognitive thing, it's an embodied thing. And so when we can share the wisdom of our learning, that is the medicine for other people who are going through it. So it's a way of giving back to people who are wanting to gain a deeper understanding of their own processes. So wisdom, studying the virtues. So if you look at all the different religions and traditions on the planet, there's some universal concepts like compassion, understanding, tolerance, acceptance, discipline, trust, faith, prayerfulness, so many different, commitment, determination, perseverance. So those are the virtues. So learning to embody all of them. So it's
there's a lot out
task.
there.
Yeah, humility, so there's so many, and those are the things that I aim to master, not necessarily rising to the corporate ladder. That's not that interesting. It's those things that I want to cultivate, because these are the things that these are to me like our soul's qualities that we wear on our outside. So people feel the effect of that. That's the legacy you leave behind, or after an interaction with someone, they remember that feeling. So those are the things that I'm focused on. Yeah. So a number of pillars. Recognizing diversity, that there's no one way to look at things, that there's multiple ways, and it adds to the color and interest, how interesting this world is. And as soon as I start to think that my way is the best way, well, I'm being an idiot, because I'm excluding a whole subset of interesting ways of perceiving the world that are valuable. They may not be my truth, but they're somebody's truth, and that's important too. So I've got 8 pillars that I follow, and those are, I guess, spiritual practices as well as principles that help guide me. One of them is 100% responsibility. So I take responsibility for what I put out in the world. I'm not responsible for someone else, but if I experience something negatively, well, then it's my perception that gives rise to negativity, or my response to something that can be positive or negative. So I'm responsible for how I respond to these things. So I want to, if I've upset someone, well, I need to take responsibility for my role in that and make amends. And sometimes it has nothing to do with me. They're upset because of whatever's going on for them. So learning of what's mine and what's theirs as well. So without exacerbating the problem.
That is a difficult boundary to recognize, but that's where the internal work is required, to know when your 100% responsibility ends and other people's responsibilities start. But
and
that's a deep discussion. I knew it'd sort of get a bit so in terms of the art of healing, because you mentioned that quite a bit in your work, so essentially it sort of encompasses what you've been talking about in terms of the spiritual principles and the boundaries that you talk about, and the let's call it the negative emotions that you have.
Negative doesn't mean bad.
No, exactly. We've got to call it something, as opposed to the good stuff. We can't call it bad. But you've got to have negative with positive, otherwise it's not a negative. That's just the way it is. Um, Healing. I mean, is there more to healing, or is it sort of as simple as that?
Well, there's an art and a science to healing, and depends what you consider healing. For me, healing is the completion of a process. So coming to peace after experiencing conflict, returning to yourself, reclaiming aspects of yourself that have been left in the past because of some shitty thing that happened, that you can bring them back into the present, integrate them into your current self, and feel at ease and peace with who you are now and who you were then, as a part of a process to get you to where you are now. So doesn't mean that your illness will disappear, but you can come to be a place of acceptance and peace with that in your life. So that, to me, whatever enables that is a healing process. So it can come through storytelling, again, sharing wisdom of your own experience with other people who need to hear that right now. And it could be such a relief to know that they're not alone, and that because someone else went through it, that they can get through it too. So provide some strength. The healing interaction. So I feel like healing, we can do our own self-healing, but I feel like what happens between two people or within a group of people is just profoundly powerful. It's a whole other level of healing that occurs. So the art, speaking as a practitioner or facilitator, then there's things that I need to embody in order to facilitate a process. I can't be with somebody and they're sharing the story and feeling judgmental about what they're telling me, or trying to convince them that what they're feeling is not correct or not accurate, that I'm employing my own agenda or my own lens of experience on them. That's not going to help heal anything. So I have to actually approach everything that they bring to me with unconditional love, with compassion, with a sense of peace. And so when we don't feel at peace with something, it's because we're not feeling at peace with what's something inside of ourselves. So flagging that within a session, like, ooh, this is bringing something up for me, means that they're bringing something to me to help me as well, process something or work through something to heal something for myself, because we're not complete. We have things we need to heal as healers as well. So it's my approach, my ability to have rapport with them, their ability to trust me, because without trust, nothing's going to happen. Trust is like an opening. And for me, I need to have empathy. So being where they're at rather than where I want them to be. I also need to hold a vision of their potential, that they're not just someone with depression or cancer, that they're a human being with incredible spirit and who have gotten through so much. They're resilient, they have strength, they have all these kind of superpowers that they're not always aware that they have. And so it's my role sometimes to help them realize that, not by saying, oh, but you're amazing, you're great. No, hearing their story and pointing out the things that they're saying that reveal those aspects about themselves, or reframing, because we tend to see ourselves quite negatively, but there's another way of looking at things that are quite positive, the things that we can appreciate. So I need to be able to hold a big vision that this person can get through whatever it is they're going through and come to the other side of it with strength and with equanimity, or at least acceptance. So if I don't have that vision for them, well, how can I help their mind or their consciousness get there too? So I don't have to know what's going to happen. I can't know what's going to happen. I just have to have a desire so that they fulfill their potential, or that they remember themselves as powerful and human and amazing. So I have to see that in them. And that it's kind of like that's what pulls the process towards that. So those are a few elements that the healer can hold to support the person who's receiving to undergo a healing process, or to, unfold.
Yeah, that's amazing. Sorry, I've cut you up
Sorry,
there.
no, I talk too much.
Passion. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's amazing. If our if I had these kind of senses, my healing senses or my healing powers, and working on them from an early stage, I think would have made a massive difference to my patients, definitely. Do you see this?
I'm sure you've done a massive difference for your patients. It's just that we don't know what we don't know. And it's until we decide that we want to understand how we can facilitate these amazing beneficial experiences for people. Unless we know to do that, to seek that, or to ask that question, we don't get that.
I think probably we do it on autopilot and we do it automatically, and we don't give ourselves enough credit for doing these things. And I think now that we're having this discussion, it becomes, you kind of look back with that wisdom, because you have wisdom now of what happened in the past, and have accepted that actually you did do the healing and you did process their trauma and your trauma at the same time, and you've found yourself at the same time without actually giving it a formal process. But I think having that formal process, us being quite formal, it's good to have, and just sort of formalize things. And I think that's why it's important that we have people like yourself to formalize the spiritual and the healing and the intuition and the empathy and the emotion, just to put it out there on paper and in a book. And your book's coming out at some stage. Tell us about your book.
Oh no, it keeps changing. I'm not going to talk about it.
Why?
But I know I'm clear about what it's about now, but I'm not going to talk about it yet.
So it's a surprise.
Surprise book. Yep.
A surprise book. Yeah, I mean, I had though I wrote my book, is I just got it out there. You know, I spent years and years and years traumatizing over it. And it was just like, right, that's it. It's going out there. And even when it went out there, it was still, it must be useless, it's worthless. It's, you know, that constant negative voice in the head constantly telling you that it's a waste of time, and this, and just seeing the difference that it makes to people. I think, you know, as you look back, you do notice the immense change that you're having on other people. You talk about placebo effect quite a lot, and that's an interesting topic. I know we'll probably need a whole show on the placebo effect, so we'll probably leave that then, the placebo effect, for another time.
Yeah. Well, I kind of talked about it just now when I talked about the attributes of a healer. So these are the things that actually capitalize on the placebo effect and make it intentional without being deceptive, still being ethical. But this is the thing, you know, it's how we use our mind and our being and our intention to have a positive effect on someone else that isn't manipulating or using our influence in a negative way. So that is a taster of what's yet to come on another podcast about the placebo effect.
Cool. So it's a big topic, emotion and intuition, but I think it's something that's essential as a physician, that we allow ourselves to tune into that inherent ability that we all have from a super young age, and just allowing that collective unconsciousness that we're all part of. And people know what that means deep inside. It means different things to different people, but it's just allowing that old wisdom into oneself.
I think simply the collective unconscious is just our desire as humans to have our needs met, our need to be loved, to belong, to feel safe, to feel like we are accepted, we're valuable, we're worthy. So these are the same for everyone, whether we talk about it or not. So all our issues come from not feeling those things or not having those needs met. So using our intuition is a way of helping us tap into what is their thing that they really need, what it matters to them so much that they're not getting, and it's coming out in their aggressive blame towards the doctor about being late, or like what is. There's always more than just the story of what people are saying. So intuition helps us get to that, and when we practice it, we can get to it almost immediately. It becomes very easy to just detect.
Yeah, it's a quick process. It's not something that takes 10 minutes to do. It's instant, essentially.
Yeah.
Cool.
So practice helps it out.
Practice makes permanent, as I've heard from some people.
I like that one. I haven't heard that.
Yeah, I thought you'd like that one. I mean, I have changed it to practice makes. I can't remember now. Something Haidarism. Anyway, I'll probably tweet it out somewhere. So, you're part of the Safe Space Health movement. That's interesting.
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
So, yes, it is an app. It's coming out later on this year. And it's a safe space for health professionals and students who are training to become any of the diverse health professions.
Cool.
To anonymously offload and debrief about the things that are getting to them, or things they want to just share with a group of people who they don't know, and from around the world. And that they'll be heard, they'll be respected, accepted. So it's about establishing this safe space.
Cool.
And there'll be lots of other things to it that go beyond the safe space, that link into their own support networks, as well as part of a broader suicide prevention initiative. So our aim is to really address some of the upstream risks that can lead to mental health distress or mental illness, and then can also eventuate or morph into suicide ideation and suicide. So we really wanted to go upstream.
Cool. And
provide something that's really needed by the community, that the collective unconscious has been screaming for.
Yes, and we're not listening to it. So we'll leave some links in the notes today for that. If they want to get hold of you, Nats, what's the best way to get hold of you, and what's your bits?
They can find me on Twitter at Nats for Docs. So my name, they can find me under my name, or they can email me at hello@drnataliemartinek.com.
Cool. So all the bits and pieces will be on the notes and the website. I always ask this question at the end. You've probably heard this question before. What's the naughtiest thing you've ever done, Nats?
You asked me, and I'm just so not naughty. I just, you're trying to get me into the vault. What have I done that's naughty? Depends what age. Are you looking for an age range? You're not going to help me. Okay. I'm so lame. Just sneaking out, doing lots of lying, manipulating to get my way, and so that I can leave my protective, sheltered upbringing and explore the world a little more with some other naughty people. So
I haven't had a proper naughty answer yet so far. Everyone keeps avoiding that question.
You're asking to out me. I do have some naughty things, but nothing I want to reveal live.
Cool. Excellent. So thanks for your time, Nats.
Thank you, Haidar.
Thank you everyone for listening, and until next time, may your spirits be surgically present. That quite didn't work, did it? Okay, guys.
May your spirits not be surgically removed.
Okay, guys. Have a good one. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to this installment of the Surgical Spirit podcast. For all the latest in the world of surgical spirit, don't forget to follow on Twitter at The Third Eye Doc, and catch me on Facebook at the page The Third Eye Doctor. You can visit the website at www.thethirdeyedoctor.co.uk for more information on the work that I do. And please send us feedback and questions and suggestions for the podcast. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. I've been Dr. Haidar Al-Hakim, and I'll see you next time.